So it's kind of common sense that you should watch the way you behave when you have little kids in your presence, because the concern is that the little kids can pick up your bad behavior or maybe learn a choice word or two that they're not supposed to be using in preschool. The underlying concern in this is that children can observe your bad behavior and then learn through observing it. And there's a psychologist who studied this by the name of Albert Bandura, and this is actually a very famous psychological experiment known as the Bobo Doll Experiment. And the Bobo Doll Experiment is a pretty famous psychological research study that you hear cited sometimes when people are having the debate of whether or not they should ban violent video games.
Bandura was responsible for contributions to the field of education and to several fields of psychology, including social cognitive theory, therapy, and personality psychology, and was also of influence in the transition between behaviorism and cognitive psychology. He is known as the originator of social learning theory and the theoretical construct of self-efficacy, and is also responsible for the influential 1961 Bobo Doll Experiment. The initial phase of Bandura's research analyzed the foundations of human learning and the willingness of children and adults to imitate behavior observed in others. He found that according to social learning theory, models are an important source for learning new behaviors and for achieving behavioral change in institutionalized settings. Social learning theory became one of the theoretical frameworks for entertainment education, a method of creating socially beneficial entertainment pioneered by Miguel Sabido.
For those of you who don't know, a Bobo doll is basically a blow-up doll that you can punch. Now, I don't know if kids still play with these things these days, since now they have Xboxes and all sorts of other fancy technology, but this experiment was back in 1965, and, this is pretty much the cream of the crop when it came to toys back then. So this is an inflatable doll people call a Bobo doll, because it has a clown on it.
Bobo doll is a round-bottomed toy, usually egg-shaped, and tends to right itself when pushed, doing so in contradiction to how it should fall. The toy is typically hollow with a weight inside the bottom hemisphere. The placement of this weight is such that the toy has a center of mass below the center of the hemisphere, so that any tilting raises the center of mass. When such a toy is pushed over, it wobbles for a few moments, while it seeks the upright orientation, which is an equilibrium at the minimum gravitational potential energy.
So the way the experiment worked was they had a group of children in a laboratory doing an arts and crafts project. That sounds nice enough, except in the middle of it, suddenly a man appeared and proceeded to start punching and hitting and kicking this inflatable doll. And not only was he being aggressive physically towards this doll, he was also shouting, "Hit it, kick it." So he did this for 10 minutes straight, just pummeling this doll to a bloody pulp, if you could say that about an inflatable doll, all the while yelling, "Hit it, kick it." And some of the children observed this behavior, and other ones, it didn't really faze them. They were just so into their arts and crafts project that I guess it really didn't matter much to them. So after the 10 minutes passed, the man left, and the next part of the experiment required the kids to feel frustrated. So the researchers were kind of mean about this, and what they did was they gave these kids an impossible puzzle to solve. In other words, they gave them a puzzle with some pieces missing, and imagine how frustrating that must be. You can't put it together. So they knew that that would cause frustration. And what they did was the researchers observed through a one-way mirror how the kids reacted to this frustration.
The aim of Bandura's experiment was to demonstrate if children were witnesses to an aggressive display by an adult, would they imitate this aggressive behavior when given the opportunity. The participants in these experiments consisted of 72 children from the Stanford University Nursery School between the ages of 37 months and 69 months. For the experiments, a third of the children were exposed to an aggressive model, another third were exposed to a non-aggressive model, and the remaining participants formed the control group.
Now, in this laboratory, they were brought to a room where it was filled with toys. So maybe here's a balloon, here's a cool teddy bear, and of course in the room was this Bobo doll, the very same one that man had beat up for 10 minutes. And what the researchers observed was many of the children would actually come up to the doll and proceed to hit it. And not only were a lot of them hitting it, the ones that were hitting it were often yelling, "Hit it, kick it."
Bandura found that the children exposed to the aggressive people were more likely to pursue physically aggressive behavior than those who were not. The results concerning gender differences strongly satisfied Bandura's prediction that children are more influenced by same-sex models. Results also showed that boys exhibited more aggression when exposed to aggressive male models than aggressive female models. Bandura also found that the children exposed to the aggressive people were more likely to act in verbally aggressive ways than those who were not. Also, the number of imitative verbal aggressions exhibited by the boys was much more than by the girls.
The very same words that guy had said earlier. So what this revealed was that kids can learn through observing the way people behave. So as you might imagine, oftentimes you'll hear this Bobo Doll Experiment mentioned in the debate of whether or not they should ban violent video games or not let kids see violent movies, because this experiment showed that children can indeed learn through observing behavior. But learning a behavior and performing a behavior are two separate topics. Many of the kids were aggressive towards the doll and yelled the same things that the man had yelled. So you could say, all right, so the majority of kids, yes, were aggressive towards the doll, but not all of the kids were aggressive towards the doll. Maybe all the kids didn't learn this aggressive behavior. So Bandura wanted to know, what's going on with these kids? How come they didn't behave the same way towards the doll? Did they maybe not learn that aggressive behavior? So they performed another experiment that was fairly similar to the one I just described. So in this next experiment, what they did was they set up a TV in a laboratory. So on this TV, the kids saw a Bobo doll and someone being aggressive towards the Bobo doll, also yelling, hit it, kick it. But the difference here was that the video showed afterwards that person being punished for acting that way towards the doll. They were spanked and told they were doing something wrong. So the children saw the consequence of that behavior. So after they watched the video, they were placed into a room again with toys. And some of the kids, again, walked up to the Bobo doll and started hitting it. And not only were they hitting it, they were also yelling, hit it, kick it. So these kids did that. But what about these kids? Did they not learn that behavior? So what they did to find that out was the researchers basically bribed these kids and offered them stickers and juice, things kids love, if they could imitate the behavior that they saw on TV. And what they found was that the kids were indeed able to imitate that behavior. And this is a concept known as learning performance distinction.